All right, everybody, welcome to Loft Eats. My name is Chef Reid, and today we're going to be making a dish called a pupusa. This is the national dish of El Salvador. It is a tortilla-style dish. It's filled usually with beans and cheese, sometimes pork. The traditional version, which we'll be making today, is refried beans with cheese. It's kind of like a pancake. It's hard to explain until you really make them. It's made with masa flour, which is corn flour, gluten-free, which is a bonus. And it's always served with a pickled vegetable. They call it Curdito. It's very similar to what Koreans would call kimchi or Germans sauerkraut, excuse me. So it's kind of like in that realm of dishes. It's served on the side, often eaten with the pupusa, and I'll show you how to make that today. And we're also going to make a simple salsa roja, or red salsa, and I'll be going through that today with you too. Just a couple simple ingredients in that. And then I'll be showing you how to make the dough for the pupusa and the filling, and the simple steps to assembling it and frying it. First of all, we'll start with the Curdito. First thing we're gonna wanna do, and this is also something you can do the night before if you have the time, as long as you get a little bit of a chill on it and let it sit for a little bit, it'll do the trick. And this is the Curdito. So this is gonna be just a couple simple ingredients. Number one main ingredient, green cabbage. You could use purple cabbage if you want, but I'm just gonna go with the green today. I'll probably only end up needing about half of a head, because as soon as you start cutting into these things, there's a lot more there than you realize. And then we're gonna do some carrots. These add a nice sweetness and also the good crunch. I'm gonna throw in a little jalapeno. I am gonna take out the stems and seeds, so we're not looking for heat on that really. We're just gonna go for the flavor there. And then we're going to basically submerge that with a little bit of boiling water and let it sit for a little bit, kind of take a little bit of the edge off the vegetables. And then we're just gonna put it in a simple brine, which is gonna be vinegar, oregano, salt, and pepper. I have apple cider vinegar here today. You can use just plain white vinegar, but I would steer away from like balsamic or anything like that. Use something that's got kind of a simple, lower taste profile. You know, you don't want something that's super pungent. 4 cups of water boiling on the stove. I'm gonna start that right away. So I'm gonna get into the vegetables here. We're also gonna add a little bit of onion to that. I apologize, I missed that. So like I said, probably only need about half of this. I usually flip them on this side on the top of the cabbage and cut down this way, right down the middle. Just gonna press through. And I'll just set this over here. Okay, so we don't want to have the core in the cabbage there, because this part's a little too fibrous. You don't want to eat that. So I usually just kind of hold the cabbage down, go at an angle here, flip it over. Same on the other side. It usually just kind of pops out there for you if you need to work at it a little more. Be careful though, mind your knife. Okay, so now you got your cabbage, and you can remove any of the excess leaves that you see that are kind of like a little damaged or something like that. But this cabbage looks pretty good. I'm gonna cut it in half again. Okay, and like I said in the beginning, we're kind of like, think of a slaw or like a sauerkraut. So we don't want this like a small dice. I like to kind of keep it big, but I like to cut it thin. So I usually cut it or quarter it like that, like I have here. And then we're gonna keep a flat side down on your cutting board and just work your knife straight down and try and go about, I go about 1/8 of an inch. About like that. And when it starts getting smaller, I just pop it down on its side there and work my knife through it like this. And there you go. So you should, for the most part. I'll get this in the bowl, kind of break it up a little bit, because you want to make sure that the water and the vinegar and all the seasonings penetrate all of the cabbage. Don't want to miss anybody here. Get that into a bowl. And because that head of cabbage I had was pretty big, this looks pretty good. I might add a little bit more, but just kind of judge it. I'm gonna do another quarter here. And some of the bigger pieces that you kind of find towards the center of the cabbage, if they look a little bit fibrous or something, feel free to pick them out. I'm kind of picky like that, no pun intended. Hey-o. Hey-o. Okay, and then next we'll do the carrots. So just a couple of the carrots. Get them peeled. And you could buy these pre-shredded if you wanted to, but I like to try and keep everything as fresh as possible. And sometimes too, those pre-shredded carrots come with like a preservative on them. They might not take to the brine or the vinegar as well as a fresh carrot would. So peel them here. I usually just take the top off at an angle, like this, straight down. And then we're gonna cut like what I call little coins out of the carrot. Pretty thin at an angle, or a bias as they say. Make sure you steady your carrot too. Okay, in the end here. And once we have these little coins here, I kind of get them in a stack, kind of put it back together, putting the pieces of the puzzle back together. And then you can kind of fan these out on your cutting board, line them up like this. You can kind of just run a knife through them, just mind your fingers. Try and get it as thin as possible. Any of the bigger pieces that, you know, again, we're not trying to be perfect here, but we're just trying to get a nice little chop on this. When I'm building these kinds of dishes too, I kind of, like, the cabbage is going to be your main component. And I like to think that the carrots and the onions and the jalapeno are kind of like the things that really bring it to life. So you're not going to need as much carrot as you would need cabbage. Probably I'd say like a third. This is also great on a sandwich, you know, if you have any left over. It's great to eat on top of rice. Kind of cut that into little coins there. All right, next I'm gonna do the jalapeno. And again, if you wanna leave the seeds in and stuff, I guess you can. But usually I don't really try and put any heat on this. Again, this is kind of meant to be a little bit of a refreshing kind of flavor. So it doesn't really need any extra heat. So for the jalapeno, I'm just gonna take this guy here. I'm gonna cut him right in half. And I'm gonna take those halves and quarter them. Okay, you're left with the quarters here. I'm gonna take the knife, run it along the rib here, going below the seeds down to the end there. So that'll leave you with a nice clean jalapeno. And that's what's gonna get julienned and put into our curdito. And again, I'm not gonna try and get every single seed, but clean it the best we can. I think it adds a nice color too. That's something I kind of like to incorporate in my food. Just makes the dish look a little nicer. Get the contrast of colors, the light and dark, a little more appealing to the eye. Okay, so that's my quartered jalapeno. And again, I'm just gonna cut these in the same fashion that I did the carrots and the cabbage. Just gonna go for a julienne. So I'm gonna put those down like that. Just run that knife through, like that. And if you can't find jalapenos, you could do serranos. You could even throw a bell pepper in here if you wanted. If you don't like the flavor of the jalapeno, bell peppers provide pretty good sweetness too. But there's just something about a jalapeno to me, I don't think. Okay. And last but not least, the onion. I'm actually gonna end up using half of this for my salsa that I'm gonna show you how to make here next. So we don't need to worry about dicing this or anything either. So I'm just gonna take the ends off. Okay. I'm gonna cut it in half. Okay. Now I'm gonna remove the skins. And you might not need the whole half here. Again, you can just kind of gauge it. If you like onion a lot, do extra. If you just like a little bit of a hint of it, just do a little bit. But I like to do what I would think would be like a medium or a traditional amount. So place the onion on my board like this, and I'm just gonna cut it back. And the onion, like the cabbage, you're gonna wanna break it up a little bit to ensure that the brine is getting in between all the little cracks and stuff there. All right, so these are all the key components for our curdito. I'm gonna give this a little bit of a toss here. Probably should have got a bigger bowl. Okay, so on top of this, I'm gonna add the boiling water. All right, so boiling water on top here. Okay, so we're gonna wanna give this a little bit of a toss here. Now you're gonna wanna let this sit for about 10 minutes. And again, this is just gonna kind of take some of the bite out of the vegetables. Some of them they're pretty crunchy, so this is just gonna kind of offer a little bit of a, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, a little bit of just kind of take the edge off, I guess. It's not cooking them, so to say. It's just kind of like a blanch almost. That's the word. So wait about 10 minutes, and we're gonna strain that off. While we wait for that, I'm also gonna make up the quick other half of the dressing, if you wanna call it. Okay, so about a cup of vinegar. It can be regular, or like I said, you don't wanna use anything that's too fragrant, like a balsamic, or really, yeah, steer away from any of the dark vinegars, but anything light with kind of like a lighter note to it is good. I like apple cider vinegar. It works pretty well with any kind of coleslaw, any kind of thing like that. And it has a little bit of a sweetness to it, which is nice. Okay, so I'm gonna add the vinegar to my bowl. Nice healthy little pinch of salt. And oregano. This stuff's pretty potent. You don't need too much. I would say probably about a teaspoon. I'm not sure what I have on the recipe there, but. Tablespoon. Okay. That's about how much I put in here, so. That's what we'll be working with here for now. Okay. All right, now this can sit here next to the vegetables. All right, so while our Curdito waits, or while our Curdito sits, we're gonna make up a quick salsa. This is just a simple red salsa, just a couple simple ingredients. This is one of my favorite things to make. Could probably honestly do a whole show about salsa, but I'm just gonna show you, again, this is just a real simple, basic salsa. You could even, if you wanted to, you could roast some of these vegetables, do it that way. There's lots of different ways. You can kind of put your own thumbprint on it, but again, this is just kind of a base for you to go by. First thing I'm gonna do, number one ingredient in here is gonna be some fresh tomatoes. Since it is kind of the end of the winter, the tomatoes aren't the best right now, so I usually like to try and buy the on the vine tomatoes. I feel like they ripen better, and I usually like to buy them a couple days before I'm gonna make it, if it's feasible, because often they need to sit on your counter and ripen for a few more days. So if you can wait, because the riper the tomatoes are, the better your salsa is gonna be. It makes a big difference. So what I like to do with them first is obviously take them off the vine. I'm gonna remove the core, and then I'm also gonna remove all the seeds and kind of like the gelatiny stuff that you see on the inside of a tomato. And I do that because if you leave that in the salsa, it tends to get very watery and it'll actually kind of separate. It's still gonna taste great if you do want to include it, throw it right in there. That's fine, but I like to pick it out if I have time. Again, it just makes the salsa, the texture of the salsa is better. It's not quite as watery. So I'm just gonna show you how to do that real quick. So usually I grab about 4 or 5 tomatoes, depending on the batch of salsa I'm gonna make. Again, if you make a little bit of extra, it never goes to waste in my house. I just kind of take my tomato here, flip it upside down. I'm gonna quarter it, kind of like I did the cabbage. Okay, so what I was referring to here is inside the tomato, you have the core part here, and then you've got this bit here where the seeds are. Okay, that's the part I like to take out. So usually what I'll use, and what I wish I had, were one of those grapefruit spoons. I'm not even sure if they make those anymore, but they're the little spoons with the serrated edges. But I just use a regular spoon, and I usually get a bowl here to kind of put the guts in. So, and again, you don't have to get all of them, but I just kind of work the spoon in there, scrape them out. Sometimes you gotta use your fingers. Okay, so we take this part here. All right, then I put these in the blender, just like that. Oh, we wanna make sure we got the core off there. Okay. All right, so we got the tomatoes all taken care of there. Again, I've just got them packed in my blender here. I might give them a little push. It's not a bad idea to kind of clean as you go here. All right, so next what we're gonna add to our salsa here is just the other half of the onion that we used. So I'm just gonna chop that up into smaller little pieces. We don't need to be too finicky here because this I'm just gonna put all in the blender and just puree it up. So like that. And I'm gonna do a jalapeno, just one. If you wanted to do 2, you could, it's just a personal preference. I am gonna take some of the stems and seeds out. I don't want this to be too hot. Just cut these into smaller pieces. This is where it gets kind of fun. If you do like your salsa hotter, instead of a jalapeno, try a serrano pepper. Get a habanero pepper. You can kind of make it like your own, you know? There's all sorts of different peppers out there, ghost peppers, whatever you want to do. If you don't like the jalapeno again, go the other way, back it up. You could always substitute a bell pepper. Okay, and then we're gonna do a clove or 2 of garlic, depending on the size. These look like they're pretty big, so I'm probably just gonna do 1 here. Just take it like that, smash it on my board. And again, on the garlic clove, I like to remove just the little part where it attaches to the bulb. Take that off, maybe cut it in half. Add it in there. Now I'm going to add a little salt and pepper. Okay, we're gonna do some fresh cilantro. I really like cilantro. Some people don't. They say it tastes like soap. If you don't like it, you don't have to add it. And don't worry about if you get a couple stems in there, because it's not gonna kill you. And actually, again, we're just gonna puree this. They are kind of fibrous, so if you can avoid it, but don't fret if you get 1 or 2 in there. If you got little ones around the house while you're doing this, this is a great little thing to have them do. My son loves to pick cilantro leaves, kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Okay, and then last but not least, I'm gonna add just some fresh lime juice to this. I've read a few recipes too and seen that sometimes they'll omit the salt from the salsa and they'll actually add dried chicken bouillon instead to give it its sodium. Kind of adds an interesting flavor to it. If you're feeling frisky, and you have some chicken bouillon lying around, you can use that instead of salt. This is also something that you can make the day before. I recommend it if you have the time. It's always good to let the flavors kind of sit. At this point too, you do want to taste it, see if it needs any more salt and pepper, any more lime juice. And you'll also notice that it kind of seems like it's a weird color right now. And that's because we just incorporated a bunch of air into it. Trust me, after it sits for about an hour or two, a lot of that air is going to come out and it's going to go back to its normal kind of red color. So yeah, it's perfect. So now that our Curdito's sat for a while, I'm going to drain off the majority of this water here. Okay. And this is where we will add our vinegar and our seasoning now. Good. So we're going to take this here, get a little messy, so maybe hold it over the bowl. Just add it into your mason jar. And you can really pack it in down there. Don't be shy. The more the merrier. If you got a little extra, that's okay. So we're going to take some of that liquid we have here. All right, and now we'll get this in the fridge and we'll let this get a nice chill on it. Give it a little stir every now and again. Make sure that vinegar solution's kind of working its way through the whole jar. Okay, so now that we have our Curdito and our salsa done, they're both in the fridge chilling, we're going to get making the dough, which is very simple. It is just 3 ingredients. We have our masa flour, which again, like I said in the beginning, masa flour is just really finely ground corn flour. It is gluten-free. In fact, this entire dish we're making here today is gluten-free and vegetarian. So if you recognize Lent, this is also a great dish for you to have because there's no meat involved. For the dough recipe, the one I follow and the one that's on the recipe provided for you, it's 4 cups of masa flour.
That's a bowl, because you don't want to be mixing it in the bowl, not on the tabletop.
Be mixing it in the bowl, not on the tabletop here. It's not like pizza dough. So we're gonna do. Okay, so next we will add is just salt. And here too, if you wanted, I guess, you could add chili powder or some kind of seasoning if you wanted to get creative. But again, we're going traditional today, so we're gonna keep it simple. So to the masa flour, I'm just gonna add about 2 teaspoons of salt.
Okay.
2 there.
And make sure that's incorporated
real nice. We want to make sure it's evenly distributed. That way when we add the water, we're not going to have a part of the dough that is... So we're going to use our hands for this too, okay? So don't be afraid to get dirty here. What we're going to do with the masa flour is we're going to make a little well in the middle.
A well in the middle. Or a cave, as some might call it.
Some might call it. So to our flour, we are going to add 3 cups of cold water, and you want to make sure it's cold because that really helps the dough come together. So I like to kind of add and mix as I add. Make sure you're incorporating it. Get it all in there. All right. And it will feel very slimy at first, but it comes together pretty quickly, so make sure you're moving with a little bit of pace. And all we're trying to do here is just get it all into one uniform. Okay. You'll also find that this masa flour has a great smell to it. It's got a real strong corn smell, almost a sweet smell. And that's kind of a really key element of this dish to me. So when you're all done, you should have what looks like dough or a big giant thing of Play-Doh. And what we're going to do, we're going to place a damp towel or paper towel over top of this and just let it sit while we prepare our filling. All right, so we're going to keep going here and we're going to continue with the filling for the pupusa. We're just going to do a simple refried bean and cheese filling. That is the traditional style. One key component to this though that I guess would make it not so simple is the fact that it is, we add charred onions to this. From what I'm told and what I've read, this is very authentic. So I usually do this with a broiler, or we call them salamanders in the restaurant business. But since we don't have that, I'm just going to turn my oven on as hot as it goes, or maybe not at 500, 475, kind of like you were baking a pizza. And we're just going to take an onion and we're going to dice it up pretty small. Doesn't have to be too small. I happen to have some red onion laying around, so I'm going to use that today. Once I've diced the onion, I'm going to just put it in a bowl. I'm gonna toss it in a little bit of a neutral oil, probably vegetable oil or a canola oil if you have it. And I'm gonna put this on a baking sheet in the oven. I have my oven set at 475, and I'm just gonna keep an eye on it. I'm also gonna season this a little bit. Once I see some of the onions start to char, then I'm gonna know that it's done. Okay, so onions go in the oven. All right, so while our onions are in the oven, we're gonna get our refried beans. We're gonna open up the can here. I went with the refried black beans today, but you can really use any kind of refried bean you want. I just happen to really like black beans. Okay, so this is gonna be the base of our filling here. These are refried beans, so I am gonna add a little bit of salt and pepper to this. Here too, you could add a little bit of cumin. Maybe if you'd like to add a little bit of chili powder. Sometimes I like to add a little bit of hot sauce. Gonna incorporate that. And in here as well, we're gonna add a little bit of our cheese. Traditionally, you would like a nice white stretchy cheese like a Oaxaca, which is a Mexican cheese. You can find this at your local grocery store. This is just kind of a Mexican style cheese for melting. It works great, and it's already pre-shredded for you, so. Okay, so we're just gonna combine this real well here. Again, this is also something that could be made ahead of time. If you were planning on having people over or something and wanted to eliminate this part of the process the night before, totally doable. I would just recommend bringing the ingredients out probably about a half an hour before you get ready to fry your pupusas, just so they kind of have the chill taken off them. Otherwise, it may affect the cooking of the actual pupusa. Since I got a lime laying around, I'm gonna add a little bit of that in there. All right, it looks like our onions have a pretty good char on them. I kind of moved them around a little bit, but when you can see we got a nice char going here. So I'll let these cool for a little bit, and then I'm gonna chop those up real fine and add them to our filling. All right, so now I have the onions. I chopped them up real fine. I'm gonna add these right into our bean mixture here. All right, and incorporate that real well, and your filling is ready. Okay, so now we're gonna assemble our pupusas. The way I do this, it seems the easiest for me. I just get my filling here in a bowl, got my dough here in a bowl, and I like to kind of prep ahead and get either a sheet tray or a clean plate, something I can place my finished pupusas on. So here I just have a clean piece of parchment paper on a sheet pan, and I'm just gonna place them on here as I make them. What I like to do first is usually go for about I usually like to go for about a plum-sized ball of dough. It's also very handy to keep a little cup of water next to your station because you're gonna wanna keep your hands a little bit damp, or you can use oil. I like to use water because oil just gets a little bit messy. But if the dough starts to feel like it's starting to stick to your hands, just get your hands a little bit wet here. So we're gonna work our dough into a ball here. Again, we're going about the size of this tomato I have down here. We're just gonna kind of flatten it out here. Dough's kind of sticking to my hands, and that's okay. Just gonna get a little more water here. So we're kind of trying to make a little bit of a pancake here. Get it as circular as you can. Okay, switch it to your other hand here. We're gonna add a little scoop of filling in the middle, comes off there. And we're just gonna kind of pinch it together and close it off here, kind of like a taco. You kind of want to push down on the filling as you pinch it shut, okay? And then we're gonna kind of start forming that into a ball itself, while at the same time adhering to the crease there. Just kind of moving it in your hands, real gentle, maybe get a little bit more water. And you want to make sure you're keeping in a circular motion. If there is a couple little cracks in it and you see some beans poking through or something, that's okay. These aren't meant to be picture perfect. We're gonna go for about a ½ inch thick on these. Okay. I like to sometimes put them on my board here and just kind of flatten them out. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's a pupusa there. So I'm gonna set there. And I'm just gonna continue making these the same kind of way. I'm gonna show you one more way that you can make these. It's a little bit different. Same size amount of dough. Get my hands wet again here. If the taco method didn't work for you, this is another method that I've seen used. And we're basically gonna make, I kind of refer to it as like a cut coconut or like a bowl. So we're gonna take that same ball. We're just gonna kind of take our thumb and we're gonna start making a cup.
Pinch pot, like clay class.
It's a pinch pot in clay class. If you're familiar with 3D art. We're gonna make a masa flour pinch pot. So basically, and again, it's gonna kind of crack on you a little bit, and that's okay. Just get a little bit of water. So we're gonna go for kind of like a bowl like this. And then we can take our filling here, almost like a dumpling or something. And you don't want to overdo it with the filling either. You can always add a little more, so start with a little bit and add to it, because if you put too much in there and it gets kind of going everywhere on the outside of your dough, you're going to end up with a pretty sloppy mess here. So this is another way to do it. And then again, we're just going to kind of work the filling into the dough. So I'm going to pinch off the top while kind of pulling down on the bottom. Okay, and then we're going to get a little more water here, both hands. And we're gonna go in that circular motion like I told you. Okay, and as you can see, this one's not perfect. There's a little bit coming out over here. You can always grab a little bit of masa flour too. Make sure your hands are wet. Okay, and that is our other pupusa. Got it. All right. Okay, so now finally the last step. We have our pupusas made up here. Now we're just going to get a nice, if you have a non-stick skillet, that works. Cast iron you can use, or any kind of skillet really, but non-stick or cast iron is your best bet here. We're just going to use, again, a little bit of neutral oil. Not too much, probably about a tablespoon in the pan here. We're going to move the oil around in the pan. We want to make sure we're covering the entire pan, because we don't want any part of the pupusa to stick to the pan. And these will take roughly about 4 to 5 minutes per side. You want to make sure they're heated through. Also too, it's always good to get a nice char on them on the outside. They're always traditionally served almost burnt, but you just want to have some really good color on there, because when that masa flour cooks, all the sugars in it and stuff will caramelize, and it just makes a really nice crunch on the outside. So when you see your oil's got a nice little sheen on it, go ahead and grab a pupusa. We're going to lay it down away from you. Should hear a sizzle right away. That's a good thing. We don't want these to sit in cold oil, otherwise they'll absorb too much of the oil and you're going to have greasy pupusas. I'm going to do about 3. You don't want to overcrowd your pan, just like if you were doing meat or any other kind of dish. Otherwise it'll just take longer to cook. I'm just going to keep them rotated. I do have a spatula here, so when it is time to flip these, get either a heat proof or a wooden spatula, because you're going to need to flip them like a pancake. But again, while they cook, just kind of keep rotating them, because there's certain spots of the pan that are going to be hotter than others. Ooh. Oh, yeah. Okay. About another 30 seconds. So again, just cook your pupusas in batches, kind of like you're doing pancakes. When you finish them, why I originally put them on a sheet tray is because I usually like to just keep them in a warm oven until they're ready to be eaten. All right, everybody. Well, I hope you enjoyed making pupusas. Here I have my final here. I just did a little bit of the salsa on the plate, the pupusa right on top, and the curdito right on top. Kind of meant to eat with a knife and fork. But again, get creative, enjoy, and please tune in next time. Thank you. Sweet.